Since before I started my channel, I've heard mention here and there of a certain origin point regarding the nonsensical privilege hierarchy at the foundations of every NPC non-argument. An origin of laughable prejudice and a complete lack of academic credibility. And that origin is in the white guilt-laden ramblings courtesy of the Wellesley College Center for Research on Women. So you can already smell the bias wafting from this paper before I even give the title. White Privilege and Male Privilege, a personal account of coming to see Correspondences through work in women's studies. Apparently, going full Macintosh predates Johnny Boy himself. In this 1988 paper, Peggy Macintosh outlines 46 supposed privileges that she holds as a white woman over every member of every other race in this country. And naturally, starting from the already flawed premise of male privilege, the bulk of her paper is nothing more than an attempt to sell itself through self-aggrandizing moral platitudes.
As an oppressed vagina battered by the white penis of patriarchy, shame on me for not recognizing the totally justified hatred from the faultless, brown victims who spit on me for the color of my skin.
For that reason, most of this steaming mound of horseshit is not worth my time or yours, but the paper is linked in the description if you're morbidly curious. Still, I thought it would be amusing to go through these 46 privileges and dismantle them one at a time. It's going to take several videos to get through them all, but let's at least knock out the first 10.
I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time.
Well, first of all, why would you want to? What are you, a racist? I mean, has that thought ever legitimately crossed your mind? Gee, it's such a blessing that I can be surrounded by other white people when I can't tolerate any more darkies. Because if it has, you're a bigot, you're projecting, and you most certainly don't represent most white people. Second of all, no, you can't. Sure, you can arrange a social gathering one carefully selected white person at a time if you wish, without actually telling them precisely why you're inviting them, but as a white person, you cannot openly extend a mass invite exclusive to your white friends, let alone white strangers, on the basis of their whiteness alone. If you were to create a public, white people-only party of any kind, for any reason, no venue would host it. And even if someone did, I promise you it would be shut down long before a single white person chose to attend, if for nothing else than the looming PR threat any venue would face. Because you could definitely expect to make local news and be called out as a racist just for making the attempt, and you'd drag them down right along with you. Every other race in the West, however, very much can do this, and they have, many times. We've seen countless social and political functions exclusively for black people wherein their blackness was the only ticket they needed for admission. And this is usually done in observation of their perceived marginalization, which they blame on white people therein. In fact, quite recently in Portland, Oregon, which is quoted as
the whitest city in America.
Yay!
Brett, you love Portland.
We got a city. I don't know, sorry.
They're holding a happy hour that is requiring white people to pay for drinks for people of color. It's called a reparations happy hour. Now, Brown Hope, a local activist organization, wanted the event, which was held on Monday, to be a space for people of color in a mostly white city to meet one another, discuss policy issues, plan potential action. While it was far from the full-scale reparations sought by some as penance for the horrors of slavery and continuing racial injustice, Cameron Whitten, the 24-7-year-old activist who organized the event, said there was one similarity. It made the attendees feel as if their pain were valued and understood. And that he told that to the New York Times. Yeah.
I can avoid spending time with people whom I was trained to mistrust and who have learned to mistrust my kind or me.
I love how you think that white people actively and pervasively teach their children to hate every other race on the planet, yet you believe every other race is composed of nothing but innocent cherubs who just learn to mistrust white people. As if white people, and only white people, are inherently toxic toward anyone not of their race. Once again, you are alluding to your own racism and your own racist upbringing. You don't speak for other white people, because most white people in this day and age don't teach their kids to distrust people based on their race. Do you want to know how I know this? Because children are notorious for repeating what they hear, even when it's entirely inappropriate to do so, and especially if an adult in their life spoke it with impunity. I grew up around kids of all races, and out of all the white kids I knew, only a small number of them ever even hinted that they weren't allowed to hang out with me because my father was black. Only one really stands out clearly in my memory because she did so reluctantly. It was obvious that she liked having me as a friend and that my race didn't matter to her personally. In all likelihood, based on that experience, those racist teachings likely ended with her, and she probably resents her parents for coercing her and ruining her friendships to this day. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if she became a reeing NPC herself, because she's probably just as inclined as you are to project her own guilt onto others. Now, you can argue that there are white communities out there that still hold a tradition of racism and racial exclusion, and I would agree with you. Unfortunately, racism still exists, and not all regions of this country march to the beat of the same progressive drum. However, I could easily say the same thing of black people. There are entire black communities out there who actively distrust and resent white people, teach their kids and other black people in their communities to do the same, and admonish and punish those who fail to be black enough in their eyes. Take a wild guess which one of those biases currently holds dominance on your side of the political fence. Even if I were to grant you that this is the correct way to behave, which is clearly what you think, else you wouldn't have even mentioned it, nobody is forcing you or anyone else to spend time with anyone. You are a fucking adult. Who you spend time with is your choice. Nobody is forcing you to live where you live or work where you work. Nobody is forcing you to leave your home at all. At the end of the day, it's entirely up to you to decide which matters more, an income and a healthy social life, or your own racial bigotry. And on that note, white people are still given less leeway than any other race in this country to that end. I say again, a black person living in the whitest city in America is still granted victim status for his or her perceived alienation, to the point of local businesses encouraging white people to abandon their dignity and kiss black asses out of penitence for being white. On the other hand, a white person living in, say, eastern Los Angeles has absolutely no recourse if they feel alienated. As a matter of fact, their very presence is likely to be treated as an unwelcome invasion from the onset, and bigotry against them is seen as justified.
Bavaria is a total steal at $4 a bowl or $1.50 per taco.
Cease and desist, Becky. I see you trying to Columbus our neighborhood. You two better get to step in, you Warby Parker bitch.
If I should need to move, I can be pretty sure of renting or purchasing housing in an area which I can afford and in which I would want to live.
Is that right? Okay, why don't you go ahead and tell that to the white people who have lived in the hills of Ozark, Arkansas for generations, or the countless white people living in low-income housing and trailer parks, or the homeless white people about whom society gives zero fucks. Go ahead, enlighten them. Tell them that they're stupid for living where they do. Tell them that their income, education, and career don't matter because their whiteness is an automatic free pass to live in any gated community that they choose. I swear to God, only someone brainwashed by feminism could possibly be this dense.
I can be reasonably sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the white people living in the Sherman Park neighborhood of Milwaukee, Wisconsin were reasonably sure of that too. Right up until August 13th, 2016, when black rioters chased them down and beat the shit out of them just for being white. Never mind the hundreds of race riots to that same tune that have happened all over this country, especially in this past decade. Why don't you go ahead and finish that sentence, Peggy? I can be reasonably sure that my neighbors in such a location will be neutral or pleasant to me because we're both white. Isn't that what you meant to say, you fucking racist? You clearly didn't consider the fact that that particular door swings both ways. I wonder what your solution would be for a white man living alone in central Harlem who receives harassment and threats every day. Would you dare to acknowledge his fear as justified, let alone suggest that he just move out of the black neighborhood? And what about the majority black neighborhoods in Chicago that are ravaged by gang violence toward other black people? Surely that's white people's fault somehow too, right? I mean, God forbid we should do anything to try and fix that problem. That would be police profiling and gentrification. And we just can't have that, can we?
I can go shopping alone most of the time, fairly well assured that I will not be followed or harassed by store detectives.
Store detectives? You mean security guards? Your bias blinds you. More specifically, the racial bias people with victim complexes that you buy into blinds you. I will acknowledge that there are racist people out there, including racist police and security guards. But I'm not going to assume that every black person stopped is being stopped just because they're black, and I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt until I've seen the reasoning and evidence for myself. Not in Generation Didn't Do Nothing, when riots break out every time a black person is shot, regardless of what they did or didn't do. Not when news anchors in this country refuse to call it a hate crime when a group of black thugs bind and torture a white kid just for being white, and when most people's response to hearing me say black thugs is to presume that I believe all black people are thugs. And this isn't even to address the fact that white people absolutely will be followed and harassed by store detectives if they present a lower income status or project the image of a troublemaker, especially in higher-end stores in wealthier neighborhoods. Which of these two white people do you think will be more likely to receive harassment in any given store? Do you really believe they're both going to be treated the same? Anyone with a functioning brain can answer this question and would know that it has nothing to do with race. And if you think these two black people would be harassed in equal shares, you are delusional. But you know what? Even if your ridiculous assumption had any factual basis beyond the emotional anecdotes you've collected, I'd rather deal with harassment in a store than have to worry about being mugged, stabbed, and or shot in the street. Something much more likely to happen to a white person by a black person than the reverse, which is confirmed by the FBI statistics every single year. Interesting how making note of that reality is racist, yet the delusional assumption that every white person inherently hates black people somehow isn't.
I can turn on the television or open the front page of the paper and see people of my race widely and positively represented.
No, you can't. You see what you want to see, Peggy. And you clearly want to see racism because it's the only thing that makes you feel normal in the racist way you were evidently raised. You turn on the TV or open the paper and see people being represented positively who happen to be white, while you conveniently ignore the white thieves, cheaters, murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. Just the same as you ignore the black politicians, celebrities, tutors, community leaders, and sympathetic appeals to their supposed victim status. What you don't see is anyone in any news outlet, then or now, praising white people for anything as a racial collective. You don't hear anyone flatly declaring that black people, or any other race, should behave like white people. No, all you see is a majority of white faces and just assume that's what's being implied, conveniently ignoring the fact that this country's population is majority white by far, even more so then than now. And now you live in the era of Black Lives Matter, Antifa, racially exclusive safe spaces, and white people virtue signaling in slave bondage. The age where the deliberate removal of white faces on screen or on stage is celebrated as tolerant. A chain reaction authored by your own hand. Now, not only can the black and brown people you're attempting to speak for expect to see themselves represented in all media, they can expect to see themselves represented in historical roles where they most definitely weren't, just to keep crybullies like you happy. In the recent movie Mary, Queen of Scots, for instance, this is who they cast to play Lord Thomas Randolph, Queen Elizabeth's ambassador to Scotland. And this is who they chose to play Bess of Hardwicke, a notable and powerful dignitary in the Elizabethan court. If this were done to any black or brown historical figure, nobody would stand for it, and you know it. The truly stupid part of all of this is the fact that you are now 84 years old, Peggy. You actually lived through the age of Jim Crow laws and the March for Civil Rights as a functioning adult capable of forming long-term memories. You know what true systemic racism looks like. You know better than most that it wouldn't have to hide or be subtle if it truly existed, and yet you still wrote this brainless article.
When I am told about our national heritage or about quote-unquote civilization, I am shown that people of my color made it what it is.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to take pride in any of it. In fact, in our society today, you're supposed to feel ashamed of it. If you don't openly feel guilty for it, if you don't refer to yourself as a Cave Becky colonizer, you will be called a racist. What would you rather see, Peggy? Would you rather the history books lie and say that all of our inventors were black and all of our presidents were Asian? Because that's what all of the Hollywood directors who subscribe to your nonsense seem to want. Or maybe you'd just have us omit any positive contribution any white person ever made to history, up to and including the abolishment of slavery, until the only thing white people are remembered for is the murder of brown people. Is that truly the world you want to live in? Is that how you want the next generation of white children to be raised? To hate everything that they are and to live with guilt for a skin color they didn't choose? Because if so, we're well on track to that future and we have you to thank for it. I hope you're proud of yourself. And for the record, we don't ascribe the development of civilization to white people. I'm pretty sure every credible historical account places the dawn of civilization in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates, a very non-white area. And there is no shortage of praise for its ingenuity, nor for the ingenuity of other non-white civilizations before the age of white colonialism, both affected and unaffected, to the point where there are still undeveloped tribal communities out there that are deemed off-limits to outsiders for the sake of their preservation. And you'd know that if you did some actual studying in your lifetime instead of prostrating yourself before what you believe to be a monolith of black victimhood and apologizing for the color of your skin. For the life of me, I don't know how you managed to attain any sort of degree, much less a fucking PhD.
I can be sure that my children will be given curricular materials that testify to the existence of their race.
Right, because no history book anywhere covers the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the Incas, the Mayans, the Sumerians, the Kingdom of Kush, the Kingdom of Axum, the many dynasties of both Egypt and China, the Vedic period of ancient India and the spread of Buddhism, the Mughal Empire and the spread of Islam, or the Jomon period of Japan and the earliest roots of Shintoism. I'm sure these things are just figments of my imagination, and there's really no record of them. Peggy, the reason your children read about things that testify to the existence of their race first is because they live here. And therefore, the history that is going to be most immediately relevant to them is the history of their country, their government, and the laws under which they live. Are you really so naive that you believe children in China are reading about the history of white cultures before their own? Furthermore, do you not understand that world history is an incredibly complicated puzzle? Do you have any idea how rare it is to come across a well-preserved primary source, let alone multiple sources that account for the same event? Your children will also read more about their own race because there is more documentation of white civilizations available, especially in recent history. Documentation that requires much less translation, interpretation, and guesswork. The older a civilization is, especially a lost civilization, the harder it is to obtain an accurate and comprehensive record of its history and origins. Much of ancient Egyptian history, for instance, was a mystery until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799. As it stands, only about 7 or 8% of all human history is accounted for, including white history, and it took thousands of years to compile it all. But no, surely the history books are just racist and only want you learning about white people. This is how I know that you spent zero of your time doing actual research before you wrote this garbage paper. You are fucking ridiculous.
If I want to, I can be pretty sure of finding a publisher for this piece on white privilege.
Okay, so what are you saying? Are you saying that your credentials and the merit of your arguments didn't matter? Because if so, I absolutely agree with you. And I guarantee you that it had nothing to do with your whiteness. If you chose instead to write about, I don't know, the benefits of racial segregation for white society, no journal would publish it. I don't care how much white privilege you think you have. No, the reason you were able to get this article published isn't because of white privilege. It's because of white guilt. Guilt that's strong and pervasive enough that you didn't even have to list a single source, study, or statistic. All you had to do was virtue signal at the top of your lungs to a board of victim card-carrying feminists who were already prepared to praise brave victims of the white male capitalist patriarchy. And those academic publications have been admitting garbage articles just like yours ever since, to the point where they can't even tell when they're being trolled and exposed for their nonsense anymore.
I can be fairly sure of having my voice heard in a group in which I am the only member of my race.
Oh, you think so, do you?
My job is to listen and be a voice, and my job is to shut other white people down when they want to interrupt.
If marginalized people have had to suffer, then white people can shut the fuck up.
Shut up about your white people problem. Shut up about your first world problem.
A hashtag called DemsSoWhite and a couple of promotional images, if you will, has been released in connection to this hashtag campaign, showing some famous, I guess, Democrats or lefties that want the Democratic Party to look like them.
It's important to me to encourage more women to run for office. But equally important is encouraging more men to sometimes just shut the hell up. It's not that women don't value your thoughts, it's just that we don't value all of them.
When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor. You don't know what it's like to be hassled when you walk down the street or you get dragged out of a car.
White people, I get bullied in school. I can't wait till I'm a cop so I can bully you. White people.
Guess who's perpetuating all of these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country, and I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up.
Their time is up, and the angry white guy.
I keep trying to point out to people not to demonize any one group or any one ethnicity, but we keep thinking that the biggest terror threat is something else. We have to stop demonizing people and realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized right, to the right.
We have these people in Congress right now, in that Senate Judiciary Committee, these white men, old, by the way, are not protecting women.
So if I could just speak to my fellow angry white American guys who are semi-uneducated like me, dudes, give it up. We've been running the show for 10,000 years. Let the majority gender run the show.
Congratulations, Peggy. This is the product of your labors. This is your legacy. Just because feminist halfwits like you insisted that white males were given, quote, an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions supposedly denied to the rest of the human race, we now live in an age where no white person or man in power, or given a voice in any circle, is going to be considered deserving of their station in life. None of their struggles, hard work, or sacrifices will be acknowledged by this monster you've unleashed. With this asinine article, you've spawned an entire generation of entitled feminists who are going to do everything they can to make sure that any white grandson or great-grandson of yours is going to be silenced, overlooked, and dismissed because of his race and his gender. You single-handedly ensured the return of segregation and widened the racial and gender divide in this country. Good job. Ugh. And this nonsense made her famous. You know, at this point, it's been said more than enough times to become a cliche, but the road to hell truly is paved with good intentions. I've always been told to respect my elders, but when an elder is this fucking stupid and responsible for this much social drama and wasted time, she doesn't deserve anyone's respect. To be continued, guys. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where those treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow. The snow.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.